Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Michael Shaw's temples ached, and by the time he pulled into the driveway of his suburban villa, he was exhausted from a full 36-hour emergency room shift. But a smile, if any, still hung at the corners of his mouth. He was planning a surprise for his upcoming 5th wedding anniversary. His marriage to Emma deserves a special celebration. However, the moment he pushed open the door to his home, the unusual silence inside made him frown slightly. Soon, Emma's voice drifted in from the kitchen, accompanied by a burst of silvery laughter. "Oh, William, you're so bad." Her tone was light and playful. "Calling me your office lady." Michael's fingers unconsciously tightened on the briefcase. It was the name William again, a name that had been popping up more and more frequently lately, always accompanied by Emma's laughter. Always accompanied by one little story after another, and Emma's eyes twinkling unusually brightly every time the name was mentioned. He cleared his throat and turned the corner of the kitchen. Emma's head snapped up, the phone clenched in her hand. "Oh, Michael, you're back?" Her voice was an octave higher than usual. "I have to hang up." She finished hurriedly to the other end of the line and quickly ended the call. Michael scrutinized her expression as a flicker of elusive emotion flickered across her face, finally settling into a deliberately maintained expression of calm. "How was the shift?" Emma asked, pretending to concentrate on organizing the papers on the runners. Michael shrugged and set his briefcase on one of the chairs. It was long and challenging. One patient was shot with a nail gun and almost lost a hand. He waited for Emma to press for details as she always did, to ask about that patient or to express concern about such an accident. But she just nodded absent-mindedly, her eyes appearing to drift a bit. "Hey," Michael stepped closer. "I was thinking about our anniversary next month. Want to do something special?" Emma's eyes widened slightly, then she squeezed out a forced smile. "Oh, yeah, well, we can talk it over." Michael frowned. It wasn't the reaction he was expecting. In previous years at this time of year, Emma had always been in high spirits and would start hinting at what she wanted as a gift, and would jokingly discuss with him where she should go to celebrate. But now, her response was chillingly cold. "Is everything all right?" He scrutinized her face. Emma nodded quickly. "Sure, just some things to take care of at work. That's all." Michael did know what it was like to be stressed at work, but what was in front of him felt very wrong. He forced himself to blame the uneasy feeling on exhaustion. "Well, I think I'll go take a shower and get a good night's sleep." He turned toward the stairs. "Okay," Emma replied, already picking up her cell phone again. "Sleep well?" The uneasy feeling that churned in his stomach lingered as Michael climbed the stairs. Something had changed in Emma, but he couldn't say exactly what. Maybe it's the frequent overtime she's been working lately, always with vague explanations of client meetings or project deadlines. Maybe it was the unfamiliar scent of cologne that wafted over her body that night when she came home late at night. It wasn't his, or any of the ones she'd bought him. When he asked about it the next morning, Emma gently explained, "Oh, that must have rubbed off on the goodbye hug with the team. You know how those men in finance like to soak themselves in cologne." Michael lay back on his bed and let the details tumble through his mind. He tried to convince himself that it was all his sensitivity, that it was exhaustion that made him unnecessarily suspicious. But his gut tells him that their marriage is quietly changing in some subtle way, and he doesn't know how to stop it. Work became his best refuge. The emergency room is a perpetual mess, with life and death decisions coming one after the other, leaving him no time for personal worries. Michael's total commitment to his cases has earned him the admiration of his nurses and the respect of his coworkers. But even so, that uneasy feeling still haunted him like a ghost every late night, reminding him of those subtle changes in his family life. He begins to watch Emma's every move more closely, noting that her cell phone is always placed face down, noting that she walks out onto the balcony when she answers certain calls, noting that her smile begins to become perfunctory. The details were like scattered pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, but he was reluctant to put them together in a complete pattern because he was afraid he would see a heartbreaking truth. But Michael still persisted in preparing for his wedding anniversary, as if that would salvage something. He made reservations at Emma's favorite restaurant and bought the necklace she'd stopped to admire in the window a few months ago. He told himself that maybe this was all just a small ripple in their married life that would soon pass. However, fate is preparing to deal him a fatal blow, and he is unprepared for the coming storm. The night of my wedding anniversary was crisp and cool. Michael left the hospital early, at a brisk pace, though the lingering apprehension still lingered deep inside. He straightened his tie and headed for the restaurant reservation, the small jewelry box in his pocket seeming to carry 1,000 pounds. The necklace that Emma had once stopped to admire was now like a lead weight, weighing him down. Michael's footsteps suddenly froze when he was only a few steps away from the restaurant window. Through the glass, he sees a picture that breaks his heart. At a table for two sits Emma, but instead of being accompanied by her husband, who is looking for a parking space, she is accompanied by a man he has never met. Their hands were interlocked on the table, their heads extremely close together, lost in some kind of intimate conversation. Michael's vision began to narrow, and the world around him seemed to fade of all color, leaving only a chaotic roar. He watched as his wife said something witty to the man, who must have been William, and then gracefully pinned a strand of hair behind her ear. This small, all too familiar gesture was at the moment like a sharp blade, stabbing hard into his heart. He stood there as if a century had passed. Then, almost uncontrollably, his feet began to move, one step after another, until he pushed open the door to the restaurant. Emma's face turned instantly pale when she realized his presence. "Michael, what are you doing here?" There was obvious panic in her voice, but the guilt in those eyes had told Michael everything he needed to know. Instead of showing the slightest bit of shame, William leaned back in his chair, a smirk, if any, hanging at the corner of his mouth. "I'd ask you the same thing." Michael's voice was surprisingly calm, even to his own surprise. "I'm here to surprise my wife for our anniversary, but apparently the surprise is mine." William stood up, his stance carrying a provocative edge. "Look, man, why don't you just leave? Emma and I are having a lovely evening." Michael's eyes narrowed, but he remained amazingly calm. 5 years of marriage, countless nights spent together, all the dreams and promises, all of them turned into a clear reality in this moment. He looked at Emma, at the look of fear mingled with guilt on that familiar face, and then turned his gaze to William, at the man full of arrogance and conceit. "I think you're the one who should leave, William." Michael's voice was low and restrained. "Unless you want your wife to join us for dinner? I'm sure she'd be very interested in your office romance." The blood fades from William's face. He looked at Emma and then at Michael before grabbing his jacket and leaving without a word. Michael sat down where William had just been and faced his wife. Emma looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "Michael, I can explain." "Don't," he interrupted her, "say anything." He pulled the small jewelry box out of his pocket and placed it on the table between them. Emma's eyes widened, obviously recognizing the box from her once beloved jewelry store. "Happy anniversary," Michael said, not a trace of emotion in his voice. Then he stood up, straightened his tie, and walked out of the restaurant, never looking back. As he stepped into the cool night air, Michael felt as if the weight on his shoulders had lightened a bit. The road ahead was full of uncertainty, with meetings with lawyers, paperwork, and painful conversations awaiting him. But at this moment, for the first time, he felt like he could actually breathe. The next morning, Michael woke up sober, despite what had happened the night before. The other side of the bed was empty and Emma chose to spend the night in the guest room. He dressed mechanically, each movement precise and restrained. As he walked down the stairs, he found Emma sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and swollen, her face haggard. She looked up, a glimmer of hope flashing across her face. "Michael," she spoke, her voice hoarse. He raised his hand, stopping the words she was about to utter. "I'm filing for divorce." The words hung suspended between them, heavy and final. Emma's face scrunched up as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Please, Michael," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "It's just a mistake. We can get over it together." Michael looked at her calmly, not at all moved by her tears. "You've made your choice, Emma. Now you have to live with the consequences for it." He turned to pour himself a cup of coffee as Emma's sobs behind him grew louder and more desperate, but Michael couldn't feel anything else. The love he once felt for this woman had solidified into something hard and cold. "I'll be staying at the hotel for a while," he said, not even bothering to look back at her, "and my lawyer will be in touch." As he left the house with his briefcase, Michael allowed himself a smile. Emma doesn't know yet, but he's prepared for the possibility. After leaving the restaurant last night, he called Walter Daniel, the most ruthless divorce attorney in town, known for destroying the other side in divorce proceedings. Walter will make sure his client walks away in one piece, while leaving the betrayer with nothing but remorse. Michael's cell phone vibrated with a text from Walter. "Meet me at 2 p.m. We'll nail this evidence of infidelity to the wall." Michael's smile deepened. As he drove to the hospital, he knew it was going to be a good day. He'll make Emma realize that betrayal has a price, and the price will be one she will regret for the rest of her life. At the hospital, Michael threw himself into his work with unprecedented vigor. The chaos of the emergency room became his best refuge as he moved from patient to patient, each decision quick and precise. His medical skills and focus amazed the nurses and earned him the respect of his colleagues. "Dr. Hamilton," a voice called out as he finished stitching up a hideous wound. Michael looked up and saw the hospital director, Dr. Roberts, beckoning him. "Come with me." They moved slowly along the corridor, no one speaking for a while. Finally, Dr. Roberts spoke up. "I'll get right to the point, Hamilton. We're creating a new position, Chief of the Emergency Department. I'd like you to fill that position." Michael blinked, momentarily surprised. "I appreciate it, sir, but—" "Don't say but," Dr. Roberts interrupted. "You're the best doctor here. You saved a lot of lives that would have been lost in that multi-vehicle crash last week, Hamilton. In other hands, those patients might not have been so lucky." Michael considered the offer carefully. Chief of Emergency Medicine, a highly prestigious position that means more responsibility, more resources, and more influence. And right now, influence is exactly what he needs. "When can I start?" Michael asked, having already made his decision. Dr. Roberts patted his shoulder with a satisfied smile. "That's right. We'll make the announcement next week. Until then, keep it a secret from the public, okay?" Michael nodded, already thinking about how this new position would affect his divorce strategy. Higher pay, greater prestige, it all worked in his favor. Just then, his cell phone vibrated again with a new message from Walter. "The meeting has been rescheduled for 4 p.m. Bring a financial advisor. It's time to protect your assets." Michael smiled as everything moved in a favorable direction. At exactly 4 p.m., Michael walked into Walter Daniel's office. The lawyer was a short, sharp-faced man, but nothing seemed to escape his notice with those sharp eyes. He grinned, revealing a mouthful of overly white teeth. "Dr. Hamilton," Walter gestured for him to sit down. "Please sit down. We have a lot to talk about." Michael sits down and nods toward the other man in the room, apparently the financial advisor Walter mentioned. "Now," Walter leaned forward, "tell me all the details." Over the next hour, Michael details the state of his marriage, Emma's infidelity, and his suspicions about the joint estate. Walter listened attentively, occasionally jotting down points in his notebook. When Michael finished, Walter's grin became even more lopsided. "This is great," he said, rubbing his hands together. "By the time we're done, she'll be sorry she was ever born, Dr. Hamilton." The financial advisor cleared his throat and pushed over a folder. "With your permission, I've reviewed your finances, Dr. Hamilton. There are several steps we can take immediately to protect your assets." Michael leaned forward and listened intently. Over the next 2 hours, they worked out a detailed strategy to ensure that Emma would end up with nothing. As Michael left Walter's office, he felt a shadowy sense of satisfaction. Emma chose to go to Witch Mountain with William, and now she will have to face the bitter fruits of poverty alone. Over the next few weeks, Michael got used to the new rhythm of life. "While working at the hospital during the day, I focused on financial documents and legal strategies at night." He threw himself into his new role as chief of the emergency department, developing new workflows and driving his team to excellence. However, it was at this point that unexpected trouble arose. One night, as he was about to enter the hospital lounge, he heard 2 nurses whispering. "Did you hear about Dr. Hamilton?" One of the nurses lowered her voice and said, "I heard that his wife is spreading rumors around that he's mentally unstable and unfit for the director's position." Michael's hand on the doorknob stopped. "No way," another nurse responded. "Dr. Hamilton is the calmest and sanest person here." "That's what I thought," the first nurse said. "But apparently she and someone named William have been spreading that around." Michael's jaw tensed. "So Emma and William think they can pull a stunt like this? They have absolutely no idea who they're playing against." He pushed open the door, startling the two nurses. "Good evening, ladies," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It's been a busy night." The nurses exchanged guilty looks and hurriedly made excuses to slip out. Michael watched them leave, a plan already forming in his mind. The next day, he called a meeting of the whole house. Every doctor, nurse, and member of the medical staff crowded into the conference room, waiting curiously for this sudden gathering. Michael stood in front with a relaxed posture and open expression. "I'm sure some of you have heard rumors about my personal life," he began, "and I'd like to respond to that directly." He paused and looked around the room, all eyes focused on him. "Yes, my wife and I are in the process of divorcing," he continued. "It's an unfortunate situation, but it won't affect my work or my commitment to the hospital. Any rumors about my mental state or suitability for this position are just that, rumors, spread by certain people out of desperation and revenge." He smiled and opened his arms wide. "If anyone has concerns, you are always welcome in my office. But I think my work has proven everything. Now, let's get back to saving lives." Michael heard bits and pieces of conversation as people left the conference room. "I can't believe his wife would do that. It's too much. Dr. Hamilton is the best thing that ever happened to this ER." Michael allowed himself a smile. Emma and William's plan completely backfired, and his position is now more secure than ever. That evening, as Michael reviewed the day's cases, a bank notification popped up on his cell phone. He frowned as he opened it to find a large withdrawal from the joint account. For a moment, anger swept through his chest, but it quickly subsided and was replaced by a calm calculation. He picked up the phone and dialed Walter's number. "Emma has been moving money out of our joint account," he said, opening the door. "Shall I freeze the account immediately?" Walter asked, a leap of excitement already in his voice. "No," Michael replied, a plan taking shape in his mind. "Let her continue. Record every transaction. We'll use these in court." He could almost hear Walter's smile on the other end of the line. "Oh, you're so good, Dr. Hamilton. You're so good." After hanging up, Michael leaned back in his chair, a sense of satisfaction sweeping through his body. Emma thinks she's being smart, but she's just digging herself a deeper hole. Let her keep taking that money, he thought. Every dollar would be a nail in her grave. Michael is back at work and feels more in control than ever. Emma didn't know what would await her, but soon, very soon, she would find out. Betrayal comes with a price, and it's a price that will stick with her forever. The courthouse loomed majestically before Emma, its stately appearance sending a shiver down her spine. She gripped her handbag tightly, her knuckles white from the effort. Beside her, William shifted uneasily, his earlier haughty arrogance now replaced by palpable anxiety. "Ready?" Emma asked, her voice tight. William nodded but avoided her gaze. "Let's get this over with." As they walked up the steps, Emma allowed herself to harbor a glimmer of hope. They have gathered a great deal of evidence allegedly against Michael, and the judge will surely be able to see through his disguise and recognize that he is the authoritarian, controlling monster she describes him to be. The courtroom bustled with activity, and Emma's eyes immediately locked on Michael, who was sitting at the plaintiff's table. His posture was relaxed, his expression calm. Beside him sat his attorney, Walter Daniel, with a predator-like gleam in his eye. Emma's stomach lurched. This wasn't going to be an easy fight. As the trial progresses, Emma watches in horror as Walter systematically dismantles every accusation she and William make. For each allegation of abuse or control, Walter brought out witnesses, co-workers, friends, even Emma's own family who have testified to Michael's character and integrity. Then comes the financial evidence. Walter showed detailed records of Emma's withdrawals from the joint account, painting a picture of an attempt to abscond with her lover and transfer the joint property. "Your Honor," Walter's voice was silky smooth, "it is clear that Mrs. Hamilton's allegations are not only baseless, but malicious. She has attempted to destroy my client's reputation and career while engaging in extramarital affairs and financial misconduct. Emma's lawyer, a much cheaper option than Walter, looks totally stumped. He flipped through his notes, trying to find a counter-argument that would never come up. The final death blow came when Walter produced a series of emails that documented Emma and William's correspondence in the months leading up to the incident. The content of the email is revealing and blunt, leaving absolutely nothing to the imagination. Emma felt the blood recede from her face and watched the judge's expression grow harsher as she read the emails. Beside her, William had gone pale, and his eyes kept darting to the exit as if he were ready to run away at any moment. When the judge announces the verdict, Emma feels like her whole world is falling apart. The divorce was granted and all of Michael's claims were upheld. She has nothing but her personal belongings, receives pitiful alimony, and struggles to keep up with even the rent on a decent apartment. This court sustains the claim of the plaintiff, Dr. Michael Hamilton, the judge declared, and Mrs. Hamilton's allegations of abuse and control are all dismissed, which may amount to defamation in light of the clear evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct. She will be awarded only the minimum alimony required by law. Emma sat frozen in place, watching as the courtroom began to clear. She turned to William for some sort of comfort or reassurance, only to find that he had halfway fled. "William!" she cried, her voice breaking. He stopped in the doorway and looked back at her with a mixture of pity and disgust in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Emma. I can't go on. It's over." With that, he left, leaving Emma alone in the rapidly emptying courtroom. Emma stumbled to her feet and walked unsteadily toward the courthouse steps. The bright sunlight looked like it was mocking her miserable situation. She stood there, trying to hold back the tears as the weight of reality finally crushed her completely. She's lost everything: her marriage, her home, her reputation, and now even William has abandoned her. Meanwhile, Michael and Walter walk out of the courthouse together. The lawyer was still grinning from ear to ear, obviously immensely satisfied with their victory. "I told you we'd nail her to the wall," Walter said with a grin. "You should have seen the look on her face when I pulled out those emails. It was priceless." Michael nodded, his expression remaining neutral. "You did a great job, Walter, thanks." As they reached the bottom of the steps, Michael looked back. He saw Emma standing there alone, looking lost and broken. For a moment, he felt a flicker of an unnameable emotion, not pity or regret, and then the feeling faded, replaced by a calm contentment. She made her choice, and now she has to pay for it. A week later, Emma drove up to what used to be her front door, and the sight before her made her heart sink. The house was empty, with no curtains on the windows and a huge, "Sold" sign standing proudly on the manicured lawn. She sat in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what was in front of her. It can't happen, and Michael certainly won't. The sound of another car approaching interrupted her thoughts. Emma watched in the rearview mirror as Michael got out of the car and walked toward her with a confident stride. Taking a deep breath, Emma got out of the car and faced him. "What's going on here?" She pointed excitedly at the house. "Where's our stuff? Why is there a sold sign?" Michael looked at her calmly, his expression unfluctuating. "I sold the house, Emma. The new owners are moving in next week." Emma felt like she'd been slapped. You sold our house and you didn't tell me? You can't do that." "I can, and I have," Michael replied calmly. "The house is in my name, according to the judge's judgment. I have every right to dispose of it." Emma's mind raced as panic began to spread. But where do I go? What about my stuff?" "You have 1 week to remove the rest of your personal belongings," Michael said in a businesslike tone. "After that, anything left behind will be considered waste." Reality hits Emma hard, and she suddenly realizes her situation. Homeless, unemployed, with almost nothing to show for it. And now she only has a few days to deal with the accumulation of a lifetime. "You can't do this to me," Emma screamed, finally losing all composure. "Where am I supposed to go?" Michael's gaze was cold and unsympathetic. "It's not my problem anymore, Emma. You chose to spend time with William, and now you have to live with the consequences alone." With those stinging words, Michael turned away, leaving Emma standing in front of what was once her dream home, her sobs echoing through the silent streets. As Michael drove away, he felt a complete weight lifted from his shoulders. It's all over, and the last link to a past life has been severed. He didn't look back, leaving his broken marriage and the woman who betrayed him behind forever. Time flew by and months passed. Michael has thrown himself wholeheartedly into his role as director of the emergency department, driving the department forward with a passion that is breathtaking. Under his leadership, the hospital's emergency department became a benchmark for efficiency and care, attracting the attention of the national medical community. Michael is not only giving presentations, he is also writing papers, and his reputation is growing by the day. But life is not all work. As the wounds of his failed marriage begin to heal, Michael finds himself opening up again. He made new friends and met like-minded colleagues who shared a love of medicine and a commitment to excellence. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. However, fate always seems to like to play jokes. On a particularly busy day, Michael was doing a routine room check when a familiar figure caught his eye. That's Emma, just sitting in the waiting area. She looks a different person. Her once perfectly styled hair is now tousled and unkempt, and her designer brand clothes have been replaced by tattered jeans and faded t-shirts. Beside her sits William, looking even more distressed than she is. His face was pale, his forehead covered in cold sweat, and his hands were tightly covering his abdomen, obviously suffering from intense pain. Michael's first reaction was to turn away and let another doctor take over the case. But his work ethic prevailed. In the ER, he was a doctor first and foremost, and personal vendettas had no place here. "Mr. Davidson," Michael called out in a calm professional tone, using William's last name. William looked up, a gleam of fear in his eyes the moment he recognized Michael. Emma's head snapped up as well, her expression a mixture of hope and unease. "Please follow me," Michael said, leading them towards the consultation room. The inspection process was short and professional. Michael's questions were straightforward, and his touch was calm and restrained. Emma hovered anxiously in the corner, her eyes darting back and forth between Michael and William. "It looks like acute appendicitis," Michael finally announced. "We need to prepare for surgery immediately." Emma lingered in the consulting room while William was wheeled to the pre-op prep room. Michael could feel her gaze fall on him as he focused on making notes in William's chart. "Michael," she spoke, her voice thin and uncertain. He looked up, his expression remaining neutral. "Is there anything else I can do for you, Mrs. Davidson?" Emma cringed at the address. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Michael, that I made a terrible mistake. Maybe we can." "No, Emma," Michael interrupted, his tone firm but not mean. "It's not possible. What has happened cannot be changed." He paused, carefully weighing his next words. "I wish you both well, but my life will be better without you. Goodbye, Emma." With that said, Michael turned and left the consulting room, leaving Emma standing there, the weight of her choice weighing heavily on her shoulders. As he walked back to his office, Michael felt a sense of peace envelop him like he had never felt before. He has faced the past and become stronger. The pain of betrayal, the bitterness of divorce, all of it forged the man he is today. Michael sat down at his desk, his attention already turned to his next task. He has patients to see, lives to save, a department to run. The ghosts of the past have no place here. As he immersed himself in his work, Michael was more convinced than ever that he had made the right choice. He has come out of his betrayal stronger, wiser, and more successful. His life is now entirely his own, no longer carrying the burden of a failed marriage or the pain of infidelity. The future unfolded before him, full of endless possibilities, and Michael Shaw was ready to meet it. The sunlight from the window spilled through the blinds onto his desk as he focused on reviewing a complex case. Life goes on, and it's better than ever. He thought back to that rainy night, to the pain and anger he felt when he first discovered Emma's betrayal. Those emotions seem so distant now, like a story that happened to another person. Recently, he has been approached by several large teaching hospitals with quite attractive offers. Maybe it's time to consider a fresh start. After all, life is made up of a myriad of choices, and he has proven himself capable of making the right decisions and suffering the consequences for them. The corners of his mouth lifted involuntarily as his gaze fell on the certificate on his desk for the Best Efficiency Award in the entire department. That's what's really important: professional achievement, the respect of your coworkers, and the knowledge that no matter what obstacle comes your way, you have the ability to overcome it. Suddenly, a rush of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. A nurse rushed into the office. "Dr. Shaw, you're needed in the trauma room. Multiple car accident victims are being brought in." Michael got up immediately and moved cleanly. That's life, always full of new challenges and opportunities. As he strides toward the trauma room, he knows he is found where he truly belongs. Not in a marriage full of lies, but here, where he can actually use his talents and save lives. As for Emma and William, their story is in the past, a blip in the long history of life. Michael knows that true victory lies not in retaliation, but in transcendence. And he, no doubt, has done that. As the door to the trauma room closed behind him, Michael was fully immersed in the work in front of him. This is what his life looks like now: full, meaningful, and most importantly, completely his own. The shadow of betrayal has long since dissipated, replaced by a brighter future. And that future is waiting to be created and written by Michael Shaw. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.